again. So I'm going to start by welcoming you all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Probably you are surprised that we are having such welcoming, and why I'm saying good morning, it's because, well, at my place it's just perfectly noon, but probably we are having people with different, we have participants from Australia, Middle East, Mexico, Brazil, Lativa, so we try to be as inclusive as possible. So on behalf of CPEX Global, I'm Anastasia, and I would like to welcome you all to ISO 12647, heading for printing process, conformance, and standardization. You might all know that in Germany, there are 250 printers that are ISO certified. So this is important to be ISO 12647 if you are associated with the printing business, either flexographic, offset, or rotogravure. So in this session, we have an amazing trainer, Dr. Abhay Sharma. Hello, welcome.
Good morning.
Who has an amazing professional experience in color management and that particular ISO implementation. In this session, he will provide you insightful learning for various parts of that, requirements, implementation criteria, etc.
Solid ink density. So we're moving away from density measurements, but it's still used and it's very helpful for process control. Something I'd like you to see here is this, that if this black ink is the same black ink, notice that on a coated paper, we can get to a 1.8 to a 2 density. The same ink on an uncoated paper, really we can't get that high, 1.5 to 1.7. And on newsprint, which is really very poor printing paper, we can't get that high density. So a lot of this, because it's ink on paper, ink on a substrate, is dependent on the material. And you can see that here, the same ink can be printed to a higher density, 1.8, 1.5 on uncoated, 1.2, and the same for the other colors. Cyan magenta, 1.4, lower on the uncoated and lowest on the newsprint. So we see that what our understanding of printing and the measurements start to make sense, but also that throughout this 2 days seminar, we will talk and refer to the paper. And here you can see exactly why, because we're not able to put that much ink down, and the final density is much lower on newsprint, better on coated, and the best on coated. And therefore the density is higher and the color gamut is higher on better material. So even if it was the same black ink, we really need to consider the ink and the media or substrate. We will talk about delta E, and very down the bottom here in on the top, bottom left is the fact that there are different delta E equations. And the reason for that is delta E was developed to address the perceptual uniformity issues found in delta E 94 and even worse in 76. So we will talk about delta E tomorrow, but basically we should know that that's a color difference. The whole of the ISO system works on this color difference. The current one that all standards should adopt is delta E 2000. It's the best one we have. It's a very complicated formula. Luckily, the software will do that for us. But basically, we can see that if you quote the difference in delta EAB, it may be 5, while the same tolerance is 3.5. So you can see it may change from 4 to 2.8. So depending on which equation you use, the number can be 4 or nearly half of that. It can be 5 or 3.5. So you can see that just like the other metrics of the light source, the observer, we really, the measurement angle, we also need to know which equation we're using, because somebody can be saying, well, you should have printed this to 5 delta E, and you're printed it to, it'd be the other way around really, but so, you know, somebody could be using 5, somebody for the same yellow could be using 3.5. For the magenta, somebody could be printing it to 4, or you could be, the customer expected 2.8. So if they're using this equation, they're expecting a match, which is closer, better match of 2.8, while you were able to print it only to 4 because you're using this equation. So if they're expecting 2.8, but they're using this equation, so that's one of the confusions. Here is a warning sign. There are 3 or 4 or even more equations. Everybody in ISO standards should use Delta E 2000. Does anybody use Delta E 2000 on the call? A quick chat, or do you use a different one in your environment? Can I see a quick thumbs up or thumbs down to anybody that uses Delta E 2000? Was that golf cart? Was you showing me a thumbs up to Delta E 2000? Okay, so I haven't seen any thumbs up for Delta E 2000. Delta E 76? Maybe it differs. Maybe it differs depending on the customer. Okay, my message will be that if possible, use Delta E 2000. If not, then we should specify which one we're using. And if in doubt, always specify which one we're using. If you're going to calculate it with an Excel spreadsheet, then Delta E 76 is easiest to do. 2000 is a very complicated equation. Gray balance. Those of you, David Crowther talked about G7, whether you talk about, okay, oh, sorry, I didn't see the chat. Delta 2076, Delta 2000, good, Sandis, thank you. Yep, good. Gray balance is very important. And here at the bottom of the screen, I don't know if you, what it looks like for you, but the middle one is more neutral for me. There's a greenish tinge and then a bluish tinge on the right-hand side. So we're very susceptible to the neutrals, but also it helps us in printing if we get the neutrals correct. And the neutrals may be affected by dot gain, if there's different dot gain in the CMY channels. And so if the dot gain is different, we may not get that. Depending on the trapping and the sequence of printing, we may affect the gray balance, the density of the solids, and then any shift or in the colors of the inks, any number of mechanical conditions and settings. So there are so many things that really affect this gray balance. And this is CMY channels. We really would like them to be balanced in terms of the tone scale and the overall gray that results from the adding together the CMY and its relationship to the K. So if there was a K graph here, and we'll come back to this, but we don't want one to be very different to the others. So we create this foundation of a stable printing environment by balancing the 3 CMY. And here's a slide that we're going to look at tomorrow. But if you look at this patch here, we have this very recognizable 50-40-40. And in offset printing, in flexogravure, this 50-40-40 is the starting point that makes a gray, a neutral gray. 50 cyan, 40 magenta, 40 yellow. That neutral dot of 50-40-40 makes what is gray. So that's the starting point. But what really we need to do in all of our printing processes is continuously adjust that for the ink that you've got that day, for the monsoon weather, for the print media, and the printing process. So I'll say it again, 50-40-40 is the default starting point for traditional historical offset printing. So 50-40-40 is where we started, but all of our systems, our pre-press systems from Heidelberg, Kodak, Fujifilm, all of the prepress systems will adjust that. And from 50-40-40, we will make it something slightly different for each printing system. And that's the gray balance that we'd like to do before we do anything else. And here's how it's measured at the 50%, at the 25%, and at the 75%. So 50-40-40 is our standard. It's cyan, magenta, and yellow ratio. To make a uniform gray, we would like it throughout the whole tonal scale, as we've seen here. But it's never going to be 50-40-40. Everybody's system, everybody's inks are going to be different. And achieving that is really a fundamental principle that gives us a stable printing system on which we can build color management and the rest of our processes that we've been talking about.